So when I think about the society and all the structures that we have in place that really lead people to getting into this kind of this stuck arrangement where they're forever grinding and not really getting the emotional rewards, I really think we need to look at how we raise our children and how we endorse what their desires are. And a good example that I'll use actually is my son, and I think it's a great model. And so originally, if I think of my idea of parenthood that I subscribe to either because of my parents or because I thought I knew what being a parent was, despite the fact that none of us know what it is until we are, it was the idea of, well, a good parent saves for college for their kids. Kind of makes sense. Sounds reasonable, right? But that begins with the premise that every kid goes to college. Well, every kid isn't designed for college and not designed in the way that we might think about it. And so if I accept that as a truth, I then have to accept the next question, which is, well, shouldn't I think about education and experience based on what my kids' desires and interests are? Like, yes, there's some baseline in education, but there's also a question about what is the child's desires and interests. And for my son's a teenager, and one of the desires that he has is, well, I want to be a fashion designer. And that stereotypical parent in me was like, oh, that's great. You can do that when you grow up. But that's such a silly thought, because that's no different than putting happiness at the end of some sort of, laborious grind, hoping someday you get there. It was, well, if you want to be a fashion designer, there's literally nothing that's preventing you from doing it now. And so that really ties into that what if, why not now questioning that I use as kind of an enlightenment exercise. It was, okay, well, what if you were a fashion designer? Well, in the why not was, well, don't have experience, don't have resources. Once we identify those barriers, we can remove them and deconstruct them and say, well, there's nothing that's stopping you from doing that now. And as a parent, the way to kind of break this cycle, this system, is when we have desires that are authentic, and there's really nothing stopping us from doing it other than our own preconceived notions of order and like that order of operations, we can do whatever we want. So it was, okay, working with my son and saying, if you want to be a fashion designer, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do this. You want to start making t-shirts? Let's figure out how to make t-shirts. You want to set up a website? Let's do it. You want to start advertising and sending out promotional items? There's nothing that stops us. So the notion that we would delay it to some sort of artificial date when he's a grown-up and ready to do it is just silly. And so I think the way we kind of start to operate against that idea that we put people into systems that get them stuck is to allow people to experiment and really experience their inner desires and their inner aspirations early on and when they can. And it's not to be silly about it, it's to be reasonable about it and to say, well, there's nothing that prevents us from really pursuing our desires at any point. We just need to be open-minded about capitalizing on those opportunities and realizing all of us don't need to pass through the same gates to have experiences that are appropriate for us as individuals.